Okay, welcome back to On Volume 6, the channel designed around getting you up to speed on the work of Carl Gustav Jung and psychological types. We're roaming at will through the Portable Jung in order to be able to roam at will through the collected works. We're starting by going through the Portable Jung, and then the question of psychological types, and then we'll finally make it to the psychology of individuation. This is the editor's introduction in the Portable Jung by Joseph Campbell. Jung's conclusion, to be developed in his later writings, was that inherent in the human psyche there's a patterning force, which may, at various times and in places out of touch with each other, spontaneously put forth similar constellations of fantasy, so that he states in a lighter volume, one could almost say that if all the world's traditions were cut off at a single blow, the whole mythology and the whole history of religion would start over again with the next generation. Now, this is so deep. I mean, incredibly deep. There's so much going on here. One could almost say that if all the world's traditions were cut off at a single blow, BAM! All the world's traditions cut off. The whole mythology and the whole history of religion would start all over again with the next generation. Do you believe in that statement? What does it mean to believe in a statement? Are we able to hold the place for that as a reality? Versus, is there a polar opposition that comes in? This is crucial to understanding Jung's work. What things are we coming with in terms of our preconceived notions, in terms of what our beliefs and our views are, that would allow us to understand another person's point of view versus to polar oppose it? Now, this is a very simple, kind of crucial, enactment. I'm trying to find the words. But he's saying, inherent in the human psyche, there is a patterning force. Which may at various times and in places out of touch with each other spontaneously put forth similar constellations of fantasy. A patterning force which may put forth similar constellations of fantasy. So that, as he states in a later volume, one could almost say that if all the world's traditions were cut off at a single blow, the whole mythology and the whole history of religion would start over again with the next generation. Do you believe that that's a valid stipulation on the current state of the human psyche? We're holding this as a self-evident truth because we're trying to layer in how Jung thinks about the world in terms of what he brought forth through analytical psychology, the types of thinking that he has carried forth in terms of bridging past traditions. So what of this statement? Inherent in the human psyche, a patterning force, which may put forth similar constellations of fantasy, such that we could say that if all the world's traditions were cut off at a single blow, the whole mythology of the whole world and whole history of religion would start over again with the next generation. That's just something for you to ponder. And think to yourself, do you agree or do you disagree, and why? Internalize that. And let's move on. In 1903, this brilliant youth set up in the Bergola Clinic a laboratory for experimental psychopathology, where with a number of students and with Dr. Franz Ricklin as collaborator, he undertook to investigate psychic reactions by means of association tests. The basic concept supporting this method was of the feeling tone. Bueller's term, an affective state accompanied by somatic innervations, as a binding force by which the constellations of ideas are held together. A binding force by which constellations of ideas are held together. Whether in the conscious or in the unconscious mind, the conscious ego itself and the whole mass of ideas pertaining to it being one such feeling tone complex. I can't explain this right now, but we're getting into... There's a difference between the clinical side of Jung's work and the philosophical side. They made an attempt to really distinguish, hey, this is analytical psychology versus this is just it's not just some airy-fairy philosophy. They're saying that there are real-world applications to this worldview that can help people. Specifically, doubling back to the second point, that a psychological disturbance is having a teleological significance. And again, we'd have to do a whole deep dive into teleology. Teleology or teleonomy? Teleology or teleonomy? Teleology or teleonomy? Teleology or teleonomy? Okay? But we're talking about feeling tone complexes, Bueller, an affective state accompanied by somatic innervation. An affective state accompanied by somatic innervations as a binding force by which constellations of ideas are held together. Whether in the conscious or in the unconscious mind, the conscious ego itself and the whole mass of ideas pertaining to it being but one such feeling tone complex. So we could spend an hour unpacking just that. But again, if you want to know more, pick up the Portable Jung. If you because I'm sure if you're reading this right now or consuming this right now, you might be able to get to it faster than it would take me to get through this entire presentation and to unpack something like this in the time allotted. To continue, the ego, Jung states, in the culmination of this period, the work on the psychology of dementia precox, Collected Works, Volume 3, which he later sent to Freud, is the psychological expression of the firmly associated combinations of all bodily sensations. The ego is the psychological expression of the firmly associated combinations of all bodily sensations. One's own personality is therefore the firmest and strongest complex. And good health permitting, it weathers all psychological storms. However, reality sees to it that the peaceful cycle of egocentric ideas is constantly interpreted by ideas with the strong feeling tone, that is, by affects. However, reality sees to it that the peaceful cycle of egocentric ideas is constantly interrupted by ideas with a strong feeling tone, that is, by affects. A situation threatening danger pushes aside the tranquil play of ideas and puts in their place a complex of other ideas with a very strong feeling tone. The new complex then crowds everything else into the background. For the time being, it is the most distinct because it totally inhibits all other ideas. It was by touching and activating a subject's feeling tone dissociations that the word test exposed the hidden facts of his life. And it was in response to Jung's early publications on this topic that he acquired his first professional reputation. I mean, that's really dense to really get into. Okay, so since we're doing this in real time, danger pushes in their place a complex of other ideas with a very strong feeling tone. The new complex then crowds everything else into the background. For the time being, it is the most distinct because it totally inhibits all other ideas. Okay, so that's about it that I think that I can do for this paragraph. But, yeah. Talking about the word association experiments in Carl Jung's work. Okay. Jung in 1903 married Emma Rosenbach, who was to become the mother of 4 daughters and a son, and to remain his close collaborator until the end of her death, to the day of her death in 1955. 2 years after the marriage, he became senior physician at the clinic and was appointed lecturer in psychiatry at the University of Zurich, where he dealt chiefly with the hypnosis and researches in somnambulism, automatism, and hysteria. It was largely as a result of a little miracle that occurred in his lecture class that his private practice suddenly acquired dimension. And we're going to pick this back up in our next entry.